Hello, hello, hello. I am always durably excited to be learning with you all, but today I'm having just a low-key little day. So we spent the last three sessions focused on, oh gosh, we spent the last 3 seconds, we spent the last three sessions focused on semantic HTML. And today we're going to be talking about forms. Um, Give me just a second. Let me grab this. Haha. Yep, we've got and Uladil is grabbing me a link that they flagged from a couple sessions ago that was really, really useful. So one thing that we haven't talked about for folks who are watching this asynchronously, this is probably important for you all as well, is so if you're set up for programming or you're set up for learning, I always like to be in the same place. Not everybody is, I should have covered this right at the beginning. Not everybody has a computer. Not everyone has a desk they're working from. A lot of our learners are working from phones or tablets. But, and like resources are resources. We work with what we have. But if you have a table to work from, a quiet space, always try and come back to that same study space or that same programming space. So you're sort of in the right vibe. I always like to make sure I've got some water next to me. I've got it in a coffee mug because I have cats and they're terrible. Um, and you know what? In a perfect world, the same way, hey, if you've got a desk, if you've got a quiet space, if you've got a computer with a keyboard, make sure you're using those. The same way, that's not always going to be available for everyone. I always try and make sure that when I can, when I'm studying or when I'm working on code or when I'm working on a creative project, because building websites, it's a creative endeavor. You're using light and pixels and letters and syntax to paint what's in your brain or what's in your heart out of light and pixels. And I think that's very magical. Wherever possible, I like to be really well rested and feel good. But just like we don't always have a keyboard, we don't always have a computer, we don't always have a good night's sleep. And I am very, very sorry, team, that I have had a terrible night's sleep. And we're going to just get through this together. We're going to be talking about forms today. And to make it a little bit worse, forms are actually not one of my favorite topics. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just a little bit tough. So we're going to cover a whole bunch of theory. And then what we're going to do together, and I'm really going to rely on y'all to help me, help me, help me through. We're going to do just a couple of steps of the workshop because the theory can feel really abstract. But way before we get started, I am so excited that yesterday we had a learner who was asking, I would like to, that they were saying, I want to share my um, labs. I want to share my curriculum projects. How can I share my curriculum projects or my labs with other learners for feedback or to share them on the web? And I waffled. I was like, hey, there's a bunch of different ways you could do this. You need to get them on the web. You need to have these as separate files. Do you know what? One of our learners, Phil, and Phil's in Discord if you want to say thank you, built this incredibly creative recipe lab. Remember, we were like, hey, here's a recipe lab. I'd love to see y'all's recipes, but you don't have to share them. Phil made a recipe page, not even for food, but here's how to use GitHub Pages to make a GitHub Pages site with your HTML and CSS, not CSS yet, soon, your HTML code that you've written for your free code camp assignments. So this, I'm gonna, oh gosh, our technical expert Etta has already shared that. That is https://devphil.github.io/recipe. And I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Oh gosh, I'm making the wrong thing a little bit bigger. That sounds very much like me. I love this. Look at this. we've got how you can get your, Phil's taken his code that he's written for his recipe site, which again, we cannot stop to marvel at this enough, that it's a recipe for a non-food thing. Love it, love it, love it. And it's using a specific service, GitHub. And we don't recommend or not recommend a specific service, but GitHub's pretty Etta, like Etta's backstage, like, yep, yep, yep. GitHub's one of the version control systems that's really commonly used in tech. There's a couple, GitLab or Bitbucket as well, Subversion if you're a bit old school like me. And right up here, we've got our H1, cooking up a GitHub Pages site. We've got some text. And here we've got this info. You don't need to know anything about Git or GitHub or cooking. Love it. As long as we've got the basic HTML. So this feels a lot like a recipe. Do you know what I love here? Check it out, check it out. Look at this, look at this. We've got the citation. Here's who made this photo, and here's where it was found. We are not going to get in any trouble for using images we found on the web. And look at this, we've got the ingredients, and we've also got, these are links. So every time Phil has included a digital ingredient, Phil's also pointed us to where we can find that on the web. Yes, 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 yes. And here, love it. Here, we've got our instructions. So step by step, just like a recipe. And what I really like about Phil's recipe is it's a little bit opinionated. So make sure you're connected to the internet, get your web browser. It says, oh, Chrome's popular, but Phil's a Firefox person. This is so, so good. I'm so excited to see this. So we've shared it in Discord. Well, Phil shared it in Discord as well. We've shared in the links here. I am really, really excited to see how accessible this makes it. So Phil, I'm so sorry. Gosh. Phil, you asked me not to be too effusive with my praise. And hopefully that was me really restraining myself because I thought that was fantastic. Let's start getting through our theory that we read and looking at the notes for this. And this, a lot of these are going to feel really abstract. And that's okay. We're going to work through the workshop together. So, form elements are the HTML elements that capture data that your users give you. Saying that they capture your data feels like we're stealing. Hopefully you're not stealing anything. Oh gosh, we've got other people saying they've got other sort of non-food recipes that they've built in the past. Ulido says they've got a recipe for disaster. There's never, ever any obligation to share your projects, but selfishly, if you're excited to show off, I'm so excited to see them. Ooh, Mel has made a really good point. I'm going to star that because I'm going to come back to that. So form elements are HTML elements that capture data your users give you. The little quiz at the end of all our theory readings, those are code elements. Those are form elements. Okay, so here we've got our how forms, labels, and inputs work in HTML. If we come to the bottom here, okay, we've got some examples. We've got our interactive editor. If we come all the way to the bottom, and none of you say what the answers are, please, because y'all should do these on your own. These little questions, these are a form. I love this. So here we've got questions about forms in the form of a form. Oof, English is a little bit cursed. So form elements are the HTML elements that capture the data that your users give you. Stunning. We just saw the little quiz at the end of our theory reading is a form. The data that your users give you can be text. It could be an email address. And yeah, an email address is text. But we've got a couple extra little features we can do with email addresses as a form input type. Or they could be various types of multiple choice or single choice. We have a radio button or sorry, I muted the wrong time and y'all still got to hear me sneeze. My apologies. When we build a form element, we can choose what type of data our users are sending us for our different questions or our different labels. And we do that by nesting input elements for the different text inputs or the different multiple choice inputs. We nest those input elements, and those have different type attributes in our form. Ha 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 ha. Our form element will also have an action attribute. Our action attribute says, hey, when you do an action which is set by the method attribute, so these two need to come together. You need a method attribute and an action attribute. Because otherwise, when your users fill out their name on your website or fill out a review of how much they liked your website, pushing send or pushing go won't do anything because there's no method to move that data along. And there's no action. There's no place that data is going. And Mel made a really, really solid point here. And Mel said, do you know what? Looking at forms in this course is actually really hard because we're talking about, and these words won't make any sense yet. They'll make sense. They'll make a little bit more sense in a minute. We're talking about everything on the client side. And forms don't fully make sense until you get a chance to look at what the server size means as well. So what the form posts. And unfortunately for this course, because we're just staying on the client side and we're just staying on the front end, the part of web development that your users see, we're gonna have to abstract some things away and they're gonna still feel a little mysterious. So the method attribute for your form element is going to set how you want the form data to be processed. And the action attribute is going to say, here's the URL I want you to put that data at with this method. And you might be saying, Jess, just wait. If I'm building a website, how do I know which URL to use? Just like Mel was helpful enough to say, that's a little bit out of scope. We're not really going to talk about the back end and the server side work that makes this happen. So we'll talk about a little bit when we get to the workshop, but a lot of aspects of this will be out of scope for this bootcamp. Doing the databases curriculum next, or doing the full stack curriculum next. Gosh, Etta, I'm so sorry. Could you remind me what the next curriculum in the full stack course is? We're front end, web development, and then what's the next one? So either the database or the JavaScript one can be really useful. Okay, you've got your form element. It's got a method attribute and an action attribute. You've set them, but we don't understand too much about them yet. Everybody's yelling me lovingly. I love when y'all yell at me. Everybody's like, Jess, it's JavaScript next. Thank you. It is freecodecamp.org/learn/JavaScript v9. But there are right now problems, there are tomorrow problems, and there are next week problems. JavaScript is a July problem, or later. Y'all should take a break. So inside your form element, you have input elements. These elements sit inside our form element and let us collect those different types of information. And you can set what type of information you'd like each of these input elements to be by setting the type attribute. Input elements are void elements. We get to be lazy. We don't need a closing tag. If you don't set a type attribute, the default is to make a text element. I will very strongly and lovingly fuss at y'all to always set a unique ID for each of your input elements, because that's going to let us semantically, I love semantics, link those input elements to the labels that describe them. Label elements add context, telling your users what this input element is asking them for. we can add a for attribute here and pass in the same ID to link it to the input element for extra context. And that context makes accessibility better. We're going to go look at this in a second. This feels really abstract. We can also add a placeholder attribute, and this can be used in text input or email input elements if you want to show someone what kind of data a placeholder might look like. Let's come back to here because we've got not a ton of additional context, but we've got a little bit more context here. Let's zoom. Gosh, we're zooming well in, aren't we? So here we're opening up our form element, and our action attribute doesn't have anything in it yet. Yeah. I see a very good question, and I'll address that in just a second. Well, maybe towards the end of the course. Sorry, and then we've got our input type set as text. Okay, and what that has given us is a nice friendly little text box. I wrote down in my notes that the default, if we don't set a type, is text, and I'm so sorry that I'm not entirely sure that's right. I'm very tired. But I can test. I can delete the input type, and I'm still seeing text. Everything's terrible, but this is just fine. All right, so here we've got a little bit more. We've got our form. Our action is still blank. We're not worried about that yet. But then we have a label. And the label element here wraps around our input element. Gosh. And it's got full name. Okay. Got a little bit more context. But I want to keep going. I want some more context. So here, having the input inside the label creates an implicit association. This creates a semantic relationship to say, hey, that input lives inside this label. It gives a user who's visually looking at this page quite a bit of a hint that ooh, this is a good question. Why this is in programming, there are problems called edge cases where it's a problem that's so specific that if it's a bug, maybe they won't fix it. And it's when we often build things for the web, the default is to approach the web where, oh, English is the default. Of course, right to left. And that's not true. The web is made for everybody, and global users and different language users are not an edge case. You might say, oh, I could just put the label above the input, and that would be fine. Well, if your label comes and then to the right of it, you get your input, that would be extremely weird in languages that are right to left, that are differently aligned. Here we've got the extra semantic context of if I'm using assistive technologies or heck, if I'm a computer or a bot reading this, the input being inside the label gives us a ton of extra context. So here, this is what I wanted to see. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this. We've still got our form element starting here. We're cool. Everything's cool. And now, when I first started learning about forms, I was really frustrated by this because this felt like I was writing the same thing again and again and again and again. Here I've got my label. Okay. And the label here, I kind of want the input type to be inside the label. Didn't it just tell us to do that? By nesting the input inside a label, you create an implicit association. Yeah. Or we can use the for attribute. So these are our two options. We can nest our input element inside a label element, or we can be really explicit and say, hey, here's my form I'm starting. Okay. Here's my label. And my label here is for the input that has the ID of email. And this made me so frustrated because if you're just doing this for the first time, it feels like you're saying the same thing again and again. Here's my label, and it's for the email ID. So that here, the ID of email and the for of email are creating that semantic relationship to say, hey, this text is associated with this field. They go together. And here, our input type is also email. Oof, oof. It just felt like we wrote email a lot, but the label for email is creating that link to tie it to the ID. And our input type being email is just a happy coincidence here. All right. Here, we also see our placeholder text. So placeholder text, if anybody can visually see, we've got it saying example.com, but I can't highlight that because, yeah, it's not actual to input text. All right, we're not going to do the questions. We're going to come back. And the hard question we got is, hey, Jess, will the Bad Website Club be doing a JavaScript course after this? Oh, and they were really lovely and said, we like going through the material with you all. It's less lonely. Oh, I really love doing this with you too. So I'm so sorry. The answer is we're not sure. So we love learning with y'all. We also love having our evenings free. So because this is a course we run sort of for funsies, running them back to back is a little bit unsustainable. We've got some other folks saying, hey, maybe let's set up some study groups. We'll go ahead, and I promise the next thing we always do after a boot camp is sit down and be like, what do we want to do next? What do we have the resource for? What do we have the time for? I'm not great at JavaScript, so I would be especially happy to do JavaScript with y'all lovingly yelling at me. Okay, we talked about forms, and we learned about input and label elements and placeholder attributes. We hinted at the method and the action attributes for our form, but we didn't really learn about them in detail. We'll see them again. Here, we're going to jump and say, let's talk about buttons. Can someone who's not me give me a really succinct, ideally in the chat, or Edda, if you want to like sneak me an answer behind the scenes? Oh gosh, that's a good time to point out. If I ever sound very, very clever on stream, it's Edda behind the scenes being like, Jess, say this. Or Jess, correct yourself politely. You said something silly. If anybody's got a really good way to say, to sort of describe the difference of when you want to use a button and when you want to use a link, because both of these are clicking to have something happen, but we use buttons specifically when we want to offer users the ability to trigger an action on your website. I think in the tutorial, I think in the theory here, it uses start game as another really good example. As a learner, seeing this button, oh, I can start the game. I know that pressing this will result in the described action. If you're using an in-browser email client, the send button on your email is a really good example of this. There are two different ways to do buttons. Why are there two different ways to make buttons? Because we like things to be a little bit complicated sometimes. Is there a better way to make buttons? Not especially. The best way to make buttons out of these two, my understanding, is the one that's in your heart. So one way we can make buttons is using the button element. I'm going to jump in here. Oh gosh. So the button element looks exactly like, really Mel after my own heart to say, hey, so this is absolutely correct. And this is a little bit of a complex concept. So buttons are great for calling a function. And calling a function is a programming term. We haven't covered it yet. We will definitely talk about it a lot if we do cover JavaScript in the near future. Buttons are great for triggering an action. Here we've called that calling a function, which is a really, really simple thing. And anchor tags, these links, are great for traveling through sections of your own website, traveling to a different page on your website, traveling to somebody else's website. But these buttons are to make an action happen that your user gets to trigger. And I'm going to be super mean because this is an interactive example using JavaScript. We are not going to pay attention to this right now. We're going to do a little bit of talking about JavaScript later. The only thing I'm going to call out is we've got two different files here in our website. We've got an index file for our HTML, and we've got an index.js file for our JavaScript. This is super, super weird. We haven't seen any JavaScript yet. You might be freaking out like, no, 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 what's going on? We're going to ignore this. It never happened. It can't hurt us. So we're going to skip that one. Sorry, I'm just making myself a note. And we're going to look at a button in our form that makes sense. So here we've got our form in action. We still haven't learned what those action attributes are going to be pointed at. Not a problem. And then we've got all of these different elements to the form, which we've talked about. We've got our label. We've got our label is for email. And remember that for needs to correspond. It needs to be the exact same as the ID in your input. Yeah. We've got our label text, which says email address, and we're going to close our label element. Here we're starting our input element, and the type is also email. Our ID, because it has to be the same as our for attribute in our label, is email. And the name of this input is email. So I don't think we explicitly talked about names. I bet we will eventually get to it when we get there. And when we're looking at the IDs here, oh wait, hang on, let's talk about the button first. Here we start our button element and we have the type equal to submit. So, okay, we're previewing that we've got different button types. These buttons are triggering an action. And what this button is triggering is submit. We're going to send this data somewhere. And here we've got our button text, submit form, closing our button. Yeah. We've got some really, really good answers. Sunny's, or answers waiting to happen. Sunny's like, okay, but in their examples, Free Code Camps gives all of their buttons a class of BTN. Is this common or good practice? So this could be related to, so you'll often see buttons with this class, but really this just feels very, this feels very human readable. The same way our ID for enter your email address is email, that feels like a human could probably take a look at it and say, haha, this is what's going on. It's really common to group these classes together. And Ed has helpfully pointed out backstage, do you know what? A big reason why we might see these all named with classes that have BTN is that it makes it easier for us to start applying CSS to them. So it's not like best practices or anything, but it's pretty common to have human readable class names with shared aspects. So this submit our form. Oh, heck, sorry, I've left you on stage. I am the worst. This is really good. Mel makes a really good point to say, hey, we learn that buttons by default don't do anything. They don't have a built-in functionality. But Mel's like, ha ha ha, I got you. The submit type already has that functionality built in. The submit type's a little bit smarter as a button. Yeah, we'll continue to dive in. None of this, if you've seen this for the very first time today, none of this is going to make any sense at all. Here we go. So we've got some built-in ones. So we've got a button type of reset. We've got a button type of submit. And this email address saying la la la. I've got reset form. What do we think the built-in behavior for reset is going to be? Oh, yep. Clear this input field of data. Stunning. Everything's chill. I've got a question from you, Little. I'm so sorry. I would like a little more information on this question. So could you type it out in a bit more detail? I'm not quite sure what you're trying to ask. And it's very likely I'm not sure what you're trying to ask because I'm very tired today. I'm so sorry. Okay. Because we don't want you to be too relaxed or too happy, there's two different ways to do buttons in HTML. One is the button element, fantastic, stunning, I love it, yes, yes, yes. Or inside your input element, inside your form. And we've talked about parents and children in HTML as well. And if you remember, the parent element is the element that contains the child element. So here, oh gosh, do other countries have, or do other languages have a children's song? Sorry, English has a children's song about an old lady who swallowed a fly, who then swallowed a spider to catch the fly, sort of a ever expanding layer by layer of animal horrors. That's kind of what we're doing with HTML nested elements. The little old lady is your HTML element, the grandparent. The next one down, that's a terrible example. I'm sorry. So, parent element here, one of our parent elements within our body, within the section where we are, is going to be our form. The child of our form, in this example, is going to be an input element. And we can add, instead of button as a child sitting inside our form under our input element, we can set the input element type to be one of 3 functional buttons. Let's look at that. So here, exactly what Sunny was saying, like, hey, we've got start button as our class. And can I I can't get any word wrapping. I can't get any. Heck. I would like this to wrap around so we can see the code better, but I'd like a lot of things. What if I stretch that? There we are. Does that look okay? Here we've got our input class, and I was just talking about parent elements. So this feels especially weird because this, y'all might have noticed, needs to live inside a form. That's much better. So here, we've got our form, we've got our input, and our input here is the class of start button. Right now, this class doesn't do anything. This class is something we would work on later when we added CSS. But the type here is set to button, the value to start game. What do we think the value here is the value, when we set a value attribute in our input, is the text shown on the button. Yeah. And again, I don't love this example because it's showing us the JavaScript, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Gosh. Let's come on back. By default, button elements or buttons by themselves won't do anything unless they are set with a type attribute for the buttons, or they're created in as reset or submit types in type attributes in your input elements. If we wanted to make a button that did something, that triggered an action that wasn't reset or submit, we'd need probably some JavaScript in order to make that happen, which we're not going to worry about yet. So let's look at some of the hard stuff. We're going to be talking about client-side form validation in HTML forms. What is that, and what are some examples? If you've never ever seen this before, this doesn't make sense. In order for this to make sense, we need to talk a little bit about servers before we talk about client-side and server-side actions. Servers are computers. They're usually not in your house, but they could be. And servers are computers that users or other computers can connect to. Servers store and manage access to data, like the HTML files that make up your website, which users can request and view in their browser. Or they could manage access to services or resources, but we're not worried about that yet. They serve access to these for their clients. And the clients we're paying attention to here are going to be the users or the other computers that request access. I like to encourage folks learning web development to think of servers as waiters. In English, a server, a waiter or a waitress can also be called a server. And I like to think of these computers as a really excited waiter. And their clients or their customers will come up and say, "Hello, I would like a slice of cake." Or really, "I would like to see Edda's web page." And the server will say, "Fantastic, I have it right here. Here you are," and give it to you. So servers are the waiters or waitresses of the internet, just waiting to get the resources they have to you. And when we think about servers and clients, when we say client side, that means any action that's client side, anything that's being processed or checked or done, is happening in your user's browser or happening on your user's computer. It's over there on their side of the business. Yeah. Any server-side actions that you see being done, and usually in documentation, because we won't cover them in this course, those are being processed on the server that hosts the data in the services it holds onto or its resources. Think about anything that happens server-side as over there on the server side of the room. And we're talking about validation here. Validation is any kind of process where you check that the data being given or that the action being undertaken is valid. So we're going to be talking about validation, client-side validation forms, but when you use a password to log on to, when you use your password to log, FreeCodeCamp isn't password anymore, is it? It's email links. When you use your, everybody's nodding, but like, Jess, it hasn't been password since like 2017. Get it together. When you request your email link to sign into FreeCodeCamp, it is validating, it is checking that you have the access to sign into your account. Form validation is when your user's input is being checked. And sometimes it's being checked in kind of smart ways, and sometimes it's being checked in less smart ways. But all of that checking is being done on the client side. Some things that can be validated is you can set a required attribute to say, hey, I have a form with 3 questions, name, favorite animal, and biggest fear. And because I'm super weird, I want to set the required attribute for the biggest fear input element. I want to make sure they don't have to tell me their name. They don't have to tell me their favorite color. What's a favorite animal? But if somebody's going to send me the data from this form, I'm not going to let that submit happen until my form has checked on the client side that they've written something in the biggest fear form. When you use the email input type, your user's client, so your client side, your user's client side form validation is going to check that that email address is valid. They're not going to check that that email address is actually an email address. Email format validation only checks, does the email address that's been put in the email type input form have an @ sign? And I think, does it have to have at least one letter before the @ sign and at least one letter after? Ha ha ha. So the reason we're talking about client-side validation here, and that the email validation, for example, just checks that it's email shaped. Mel makes a good point to say, there's also types of validation you can be on the server side, even if it's already checked on the client side. And Mel's hinting, well in advance, that this is because there are some security issues if you don't check it. This is out of scope for us to worry about. Everything's stressful, but everything's okay. Just making sure I haven't missed too many questions. So, some other additional attributes we can add that ask our user's client-side validation to check in the form is you can set a minimum number of characters that your form's input needs to take, or a maximum length for characters. And I had 2 quick questions here. And one of these is cheating. So one of these, Ulidel gave us a hint about the answer, I think 2 days ago. And the first question is, if I'm asking a question, a form, like, what's your favorite color? Why might I want to set a maximum number of characters that someone can give me? And at the same time, if I'm asking a user for their name, why would I maybe not want to set a minimum number of characters? Or why would I want to be careful about setting a maximum? Yeah, so why do I want to set, why might I want to set a maximum number of characters? Oh, do you know what? I'm going to look up the documentation for, gosh, do you know what? I am absolutely wrong. I remembered this being max for being um, letters and characters. Well, it's not, this is just for numbers. I'm going to fix this in the notes and I'm going to apologize. In that case, the max attribute is setting the maximum number of the maximum number allowed. Gosh, that's a little embarrassing, but mistakes can't hurt us. There are other ways to say, hey, only give me a certain number of characters, but you should check for maximum and minimum numbers for characters on the server side, which we're not going to talk about in this bootcamp. The server side will continue to be a little mysterious. In that case, I'll ask this question a different way. Why might I want to set a maximum if I'm asking for a user's age? Yep. And Mel's like, hey, isn't it max length for characters? It absolutely is. You are too merciful. So max might be a good attribute to add if you're asking ages. For example, yep, so max might be a good attribute to set if you're asking your users their age. Because if you have a bunch of your users saying 900, yep. Oh, I love this. Ulittle saying, hey, one of the reasons, and I'm going to come back here to my notes. Heck, where are my notes? I'll make it more explicit in these that max and min are for numbers and maximum length and minimum length are for, I'll include the syntax in here. Like y'all make a solid point. We might want to limit the maximum length of characters to prevent some very simple attacks. People could give us huge long things. People could copy all of Lorem Ipsum and just take up a ton of space. There are more complicated um, types of attacks like this, but that'll be the one we focus on for right now. Gosh, we've got a super good question from Sunny, and Sunny's like, hey. Sorry, I'm always putting words in y'all's mouth and making you sound far more casual than you are. Sunny's like, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Excuse me. The input element, does that always have to live in a form? If you, I believe if you put a input element outside of a form, you would still see the text box or the radio button displayed, but it would be terrible semantic HTML. And way more importantly, it wouldn't do what we want it to do. So a form, we want our user to be able to send us data. And the input element by itself, I don't think it's going to be able to do that. So the input element is one of the most powerful and complex in all of HTML due to the sheer number of combinations. Oh, I don't like that. So this is pretty clear that interactive controls for web-based forms. I think that this should, gosh, look at, this is terrible. Look at all the different things we can use in forms. Look at, this is not your question. I think you could get input elements to display something on your web page outside of a form, but it wouldn't act as a form, and I would yell at you because it's bad semantic HTML. But we're learning about text and email and a couple other ones. We have a ton of different data types that we have a checkbox. We've got the button, which we learned about. A color picker we could give. I don't know, does this show on the screen? Does it pop up? Do y'all see draft? You don't. I'm going to link you to this because the color is quite fun. Oh, do you know what? There's some really good points in here about security. So yeah, we've got a ton of, we could add a date picker, and there's a bunch of different types of date pickers. So we've got a lot of different types of form inputs that we could use. Okay, we also need to talk about form states. Oh gosh, and do you know what? I'm going to bring some of this conversation to the question and answer at the end, just so folks who are watching this afterwards don't feel left out. But folks are talking in the chat about different sides of like data security, like, hey, if we're worried about security for our website, should we also be worried about our personal security? How much of my information do I want to put on my website or my portfolio? I won't get bogged down with this, but y'all would not believe back in the late 90s, back in the GeoCities era, we used to put our home phone numbers on our website sometimes. People would put their mailing addresses and be like, send me a postcard. We had some hard lessons to learn as we grew up with the internet. I didn't do that, but many people did. So working with forms, what are the different form states? And form states here, what we're talking about, let's grab this because it doesn't make a lot of sense until we see it. Form states are saying, hey, what does what kind of state, what is the situation with this input element right now? So the first state that we're going to look at is default. We don't have to add anything. By default, our input element is in a default state. A focused state for our element is usually something your user chooses. So here we have a email element. I can make it focused by clicking on it. Actually, let's find a text one instead. Let's change this to text. Type. The name is Save Monster, and the email is Save Monster. Cool. So here I've got a text box for my favorite monster. If I click on it, you're going to hear me say again and again, oh gosh, oh gosh. It's very subtle when we're able to see it, but when I click on it, the browser I'm using has highlighted this input field, and we can barely see it, but we're seeing the cursor. Before I click on it, if I have not entered the focus state for this input field, if I type something on this page, nothing happens. Once I tab onto it using keyboard controls, or I navigate to this using voice controls, or if I click on this using a mouse or a pointer, I'm in a focus state, and now I can write what my favorite monster is. Maybe Chupacabra. They're nice and scary. So default, just by default, we don't have to add anything. Focus is almost always something that your user decides. I'm going to focus on this one now. I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to focus on that. But we've got a couple more states that you can pick for your user. Where am I? So the disabled state. The disabled state is if you have a form, you've spent so much time on your form is perfect, your form is beautiful, you don't want to touch your form, but your boss tells you, hey, you asked your user for their credit card number. You can't ask a user for their credit card number. No, stop it. We're not allowing you to. You have to stop it. We'll add that functionality back later, but right now that doesn't work on the form. We don't have enough security to feel confident asking people for their phone number. You can disable that. Let's look at this. So here, I'm going to go ahead and heck. I'm going to go ahead and add a label. And I'm going to implicitly link these. I'm going to put my label inside. I'm going to put my input element inside my label. Everything's fine. And the label, what was the format for, what was the syntax for labels? You can tell I'm well tired, huh? Come on. Yeah, oh, it's literally just like anchor text, isn't it? The label here is credit card number, please. Oh gosh, and do you know what? Here, the type is, gosh. Let me get a list of all the different types. Gosh. Come on. Stunning. I just wanted to grab the MDN documentation for all of the different types we could set this to. Because so far, the only types we've talked about in forms in these theory are email. And we use email as an example a lot in here. I don't love it. Email and text. But a credit card number, yeah, let's look at. Property values are input types. Gosh. So we could have a button, we could have a, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm so sorry, my loves. So the input types we could include are a button, and y'all please stop me when you see the one that feels the most like a credit card. A checkbox, a color, a date, date time local. Ooh, this is nice. Email, file. Someone could give us a file. Actually, I'm asking y'all two questions at once. Why would we maybe not want to let our user send us a file? Image, month, number. I think number, huh? Oh, password. Let's go ahead and grab number. Let me come back here. Our type is number. Our name is going to be credit card. ID, credit card as well. And do you know what? We could also say the label could be for. Really make it really explicit. Credit card number, please. So I've built, yeah. Michelle is just like, look. You don't want your user sending you files for so many reasons. They could send you viruses, they could send you bad data, they could send you corrupt data, they could send you illegal data. Like, if you're at a point where you're having your user send you files, you've had a lot more time to think about data security than we've done. Nice. Mel makes a good point to say, hey, even if you limit the types of files you can send, people could send you malicious files with a fake file extension. So here, we're asking our user for a credit card. It's like, give me a credit card, please. And we're set that as a number. And our boss comes along and they're like, Jess, what are you doing? You cannot ask people for the credit card number. By setting this as, so let me take this away. We've got the input disabled. I'm going to remove the input disabled. I can now enter focus mode. Ha 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 ha. I can type a credit card number. That is not my credit card number. I cannot overstate how much that's not my credit card number. But as soon as I write disabled, I can no longer, as a user, focus on that. That is no longer available to me. That input has been put in timeout. And we've got one more, which is read only. And this is really similar. So saying, hey, we've got an input here, but we don't want users to be able to actually input data. We can have a form in read-only state. And this is saying, hey, just like disabled, your user can't put any data here to send you. But the difference between disabled and read-only is the user can still focus on this. They could still come through and copy and paste it, for example. So disabled, can't do anything with it, can't put it in focus state. Read only, we can put it in focus state. Uladale's like, the interactive editor on the theory pages feels nicer than the ones in exercises. I'm going to go ahead, like, I'm going to be good to the free code camp team. Building in-browser editors is hard. So they've got two different types of in-browser editors they use. And the one used in interactive editors is a third-party service called Code Sandbox, and they're really nice. I believe the one they use in the regular, gosh, Bramble, I love this. That's such a good question. Yes. No, sorry. The answer is not yes, but yes, I love this question. So here is a third-party tool Whereas I believe they'd use sort of a VS Code flavored thing in the usual ones. Stop it. Hang on. Oh, no, no. I didn't think it was a dig. I was just saying, hey, if you wanted to play with either of these editors, the Code Sandbox is something that you can, yeah, just open up and play with. Bramble's saying, hey, should we add a BR element after each form entry so the form flows better? Or would this be covered in CSS? I love this because we answered our own question here. So the BR element was really common. It was really commonly used in, thank you. Michelle's right after me. Michelle was like, hey, 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 I was looking at the old Space Jam website and these BRs were used as like separators. So this is a tag that was real common in the presentational HTML days. And we called them break elements back in the day. Looking BR, and I bet they've, yep, oh no, okay. So back in my day, they were called break elements, and MDN is like, no, that's still called a line break element. And Michelle's like, they're not outdated. Like they still work, but we probably don't want to lean on those. So Bramble, if we wanted to space these out, if we wanted these to flow better, I'd skip the BR elements. Like these are always sort of a last resort. We would do this in the CSS. Yeah. Whenever I want to change the style, whenever I want to change how things feel, or how things look, we're going to lean on CSS. And this feels especially cruel because I'm like, we'll get to CSS soon. We'll get to CSS soon. We'll get to CSS soon. So, gosh, we've jumped around ages. For form states, we've talked about this. Let's go ahead. Let's do a little bit of this together. Yeah. We're coming into the hotel feedback form. And I've been getting more and more aggressive, just in general, because I get meaner over the 10-week course. But I've hopefully also been getting more aggressive around. I'm going to leave y'all more and more space to do more of these steps on your own. And that's because just listening to me, it doesn't really help you learn much. I mean, hopefully it's relaxing. And if you just watch, you're also not getting that hands-on muscle memory. If you watch me and you're doing it as I do it, maybe a little better, but it's still kind of, yeah. Following the instructions, turning them into code, going step by step on your own, and sometimes getting stuck, and sometimes it's having to tease it out. That little bit of friction of, wait, heck, what was that? Wait, heck, I have to look this up. Wait, heck, how did I do that again? Those little pieces of friction, I'm so sorry, are often what build our muscle memory, build our learning. And Etta will correct me. There's two different types of learning. There's Etta gave a really good talk about this, and procedural learning is like the really hard one. Procedural learning, y'all, Etta's like backstage, like, okay, you remember this, we talked about this. Procedural learning is where you've taken different individual pieces of things you've learned and sort of seamlessly pulled them into a skill. So being able to ride your bike is a demonstration of procedural learning. And by building up this muscle memory, by doing these bit by bit, we eventually build our muscle memory and our procedural learning. So we're going to skip to step 3 because the first 2 steps are structure. And what I want to do here is just do a little bit of I just want to do a little bit of the form part together, just so we can talk this through as we go. We're not going to go forever. We're not going to do the whole thing because y'all got to suffer on your own a little while, both for my own cruelty and delight and because it's better for your learning. So in previous lessons, we learned how the form element works. Oh, a little bit, maybe. But here, and here it's giving us some more information for the first time. Yeah? Ooh, Sunny, that's a good question. I'm going to save this to the end if it's okay. And here it's giving us more information that it didn't give us before, that I kind of teased, like, hey, it's showing us the action attribute and it's not setting it to anything. And here it's telling us the action attribute is used to specify where the form data should be sent. And this is a URL. So here, we don't have anything to put there yet. So we've been told the action attribute, which we've seen blank a couple of times, is I want you to do something with this data. Here's where I want you to do it. And then the method attribute here is to specify the HTTP method to use when sending the form data. So y'all have heard me talk about how the hardest thing in teaching and the hardest thing in learning, because y'all have to deal with teachers, is what level of abstraction come at. So if we want to come at a really high level of abstraction, the method attribute is saying what I want done with my data. The form action is saying where I want the method attribute to send it or get it. Unfortunately, the world is a lot more complicated. So I'm going to come back here. We talked a little bit before about HTTP protocol, and remember that that's one standardized process for how data is handled on the web. The method attribute that we're using here can be used to set one of, that's a lie. On forums, it's one of 3 HTTP methods that you can use to send your form data. These could include post, send this form data to a specified URL, get, or dialog. We're just going to focus on post for now, and I'm going to fix post in notes. Sorry, the danger of sharing your notes is there's always little mistakes. So we're just going to focus on get, and we're not going to talk about this too much. But if you wanted to, you could read some more about HTTP, the protocol. It's not the only protocol that we send data across the web in, but it is an important one. And we could grab specifically there are four that work with forms. We could also take a look at the 4 different individual HTTP methods that we can use to submit a form with. Post, the data is sent as the request body. That doesn't make any sense yet. Don't worry about it. Get, the data is added to the URL. Oh, there are just 3. And dialog. It closes the interaction that the user is adding data into and then submits. So I didn't want to say, don't worry about HTTP and don't worry what these methods mean. But the challenge here is right now, we're not going to be doing anything with these. We're just going to just reasonably, uncritically, we're going to, note, we will learn about how HTTP methods work in later modules. Safe. So we've got a form. Our action attribute is going to be set to this URL right here. And the big question I get is a lot of times, Jess, I'm building this on my website. How do I know what URL I need? I have good news and bad news. The good news is you don't have to worry about it right now. And the bad news is you don't have to worry about this right now because, hang on, I'm going to set the method to post while we talk about this. When your form data is being sent, it's usually being processed in some way with a script that's written in the back end on a programming language like PHP or like Python or like Node, JavaScript, which we're not going to learn during this boot camp. Or it's being sent to a database. And we're not going to work on databases in the book, but there is a database curricula you can work through on your own, or we can see about doing it in a future boot camp. So it feels really mean to say the action URL that you're going to set this to right now, you're probably going to get that from a colleague. You're probably going to get that from someone else. This is stuff that's a little bit beyond what we're going to learn in this boot camp. We're learning about the front end building of forms. Oh gosh. So this is such a good question. And it's a question that's wondering. And Yulida's wondering, hey, why was action chosen as the name of this attribute? That is going to make me absolutely loopy. History of action attribute naming. And I'm going to look that up for my own entertainment, if I remember, if I don't go right to sleep after this. So here we are uncritically, we are unthinkingly putting in the URL for action that they've requested, and we're using the method. They say, what do you mean? Oh, is Free Code Camp having a little bit of a difficult time? Oh, Do you know what, team? I think that, oh, I thought we were off the hook, but this is working. So let's make this, I know we want our code as big as possible, but we also want context. So forms consist of inputs where users can input our data. And we haven't seen this yet, but we're using the field set element. I really like when the their workshops give us something new. Oh, let me actually type this in. Oh, so here we're seeing the syntax. We've got our form started in the example, our field set starts, and then our inputs that are related to that field set that are conceptually, that are semantically grouped together are all going to live in that same field set. Okay, so inside our form element, we'll add a field set element. Let's check our code. Everything's terrible, but this is just fine. So here we're going to use a legend element, and we saw legends in the theory. It just didn't, like, reading about them and writing them feels different, huh? A legend, okay. And if we remember correctly, legend is going to give us the opportunity to put that text, that visual clue. And ooh, actually, I'm just taking a guess based on y'all asking the best questions in the world in this specific boot camp, which is absolutely not to be mean to past boot camps, but y'all have been asking a lot of really, really focused and really good questions around how does this work with security? How does this work with intellectual property? How does this work with AI scrapers? Love these. What kinds of things might we have to worry about if we're asking a user for different kinds of personal information? And I'm going to say a keyword, maybe personally identifiable information. What kinds of scary things do we want to think about when we ask our users for personal information? So we do, however, have a legend personal information inside our field set, and everything's fine. So we've got as close to we ever get as a commercial. Bootcamp is free, Free Code Camp is free, and I can't tell you what to do, but please don't go spending any money you don't have. The world is so hard right now. But the folks at Free Code Camp who make the curriculum are a registered nonprofit. If you have the money and if you get a lot of benefits out of this, you can, it's really nice to donate to them. Ah, nice, nice. Bramble's like, hey, you know what? If you're asking your users for their personal information, you've got to protect that information. You've got to think about data protection. What if you take really personal information from them and you don't keep it safe? That's so dangerous. And Rachel is just like GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation is a EU law or series of laws that say, if you're asking people for their personal information, there are special laws about what you can ask, how you can hold it, what you need to tell them if they ask about their personal information, and how and when you need to delete that information. Love it, love it, love it. Y'all, so I'm going to keep going through this. And while I'm doing through this, what might be a really good philosophy for requesting personal information, for keeping personal information? So if I know if I get user information, I need to worry about data protection. I need to protect that data. But I also have a bunch of laws I have to worry about. What might be a good philosophy? And there's no right answer. I mean, there's a lot of right answers. What might be a really nice philosophy for when to collect personally identifiable information, and how much of that to collect? So in our label element, let's add a for attribute. So we're going to add a label. Yep, we're below our, gosh, I'm going to write it clear. I'm going to label. Do you know what? We might not do too many more steps because A, y'all are probably tired, but B, I am silly about typing today. So below our legend element, create a label element with a text name required. Okay. And we remember that we put our text to be displayed, name required. So this is going to be inside our field set. Okay. And we're going to set the for attribute of the label to full. And when I asked, hey, thinking about how hard it is to keep personal information safe and comply with the law, I was like, how might we want to approach that? And Paul's like, just hire a bunch of lawyers. It's great. Everyone loves to pay a lawyer. Although I will say, if you're working with people's personal information, lawyers are expensive. It's a lot cheaper to pay a lawyer for advice in advance than it is to mess up and pay a bunch of lawyers later. Below our label attribute, and I see a couple more people still giving me really good answers to this. I'm going to create an input element. Input. I can spell with no attributes so far. Okay, we're going to add those attributes to the input element after. And the input element, remember, we haven't given it a type. By default, the type is going to be text. Yeah. And Miss Rachel's like, okay, so if you're hiring a bunch of lawyers to collect personal data, the second stage might be explicitly ask for permission. So a lot of pop-ups and say, here's what we're doing with your data. Here's, yeah. Oh, Uladale after my own heart. This is what I was fishing for. So Uladale's giving me an example of if I had something like a hotel, I'd be careful about where I kept my customer information. And maybe if I kept like credit card numbers or counting, I might have a specialist service process that instead of me holding that data. So like keeping data in specific buckets. I've got an even simpler one that's like the answer in my heart for the way I like to approach personal data. And y'all might actually recognize it from the boot camp, which is, hang on, our existing input. Let's add the type to text. And you might say, Jess, it's already text by default. And I say, yeah, but this is more specific. We always want more specific. The for attribute should be the same as the ID. The input it corresponds to. So we're also going to do full name here. All right. Is that it? We check our code and everything's fine. So my approach to personal data is you cannot get in trouble for the data you hold if you never ask for it. The reason we do the boot camp and put all of the information on the website and stream it to a couple different places is we love y'all. We want you to be really well supported. We do have an email list if you want like weekly email reminders. But the big thing is we would prefer not to have your email address. We would prefer, you don't need to tell me your name. Please don't tell me your name. I mean, you can, but first name, don't like give me your passport scan. When in doubt on holding people's personal information, just don't take it in the first place. If you don't need it, don't take it. We're going to add a name attribute. So the name attribute is used to identify form data after it's been submitted. So this is the first time we've seen the name attribute. The name attribute's a little label, but it's a label that is used for your future self when you look at this data after it's been sent to your server. So in our input type, our for, oh gosh, not for, our name is going to be set to, our name, our name is going to be set to name. All right, that's pretty easy. All right, in previous lessons, we saw a placeholder being used. Let's add a placeholder for existing input. So input type. And remember with these attributes, we can put them in different orders and it's not going to hurt us. So we could put it after the type, we could put it after the ID, we could put it, and this we just need to say placeholder. Just is a very easy thing for me to say. And we want to say E.g. Jane Doe. Oh gosh, I swear I knew this at one point, but what does E.g. stand for? Exempli gratia. Gosh. Okay, so EEG stands for the Latin for example. This is not important for web development, but I was just curious and got a little sidetracked. Let's do 2 more teeny tiny steps, and then we will go ahead and talk about, oh gosh, and y'all hit me with any of the questions you still have. I have one question from Sunny, which I didn't get to yet, and I will in just a moment. So we've got the placeholder. Let's also add required. So in this case, and required doesn't need to be set to anything. It doesn't need to have a value assigned. I do have a placeholder. Oh, I should spell placeholder correctly in it. So after this step, we're doing something really, really similar, but for the other inputs. Yeah. So I'm actually going to leave you and not go through these with you, just because we sort of struggled through one input field, input element on our form together and talk through that. I'm going to lovingly push you to finish that one on your own. And while I'm lovingly pushing you, I will be lovingly pushing you into the loving arms of Carmen tomorrow. So you get a much nicer, much less mean teacher who is much better at web development. Everyone wins. I'm coming all the way up because I'm going to ask you pretty please to, if you've got the time, there's no hard deadlines. Nobody's going to come to your house and shake you if you're not done. But after the session, if you could please read the Working with Tables and Paul, I hate to call individual people out. Paul, you are of a similar generation. So you and I are absolutely going to get this. This is what are HTML tables used for and what should they not be used for? For those of us who existed on the web back when it was brand new, tables used to be used presentationally. you would use a table to lay out your website because CSS hadn't been invented yet. It was wonderful. It was terrible. So please take really good notes about what are HTML tables, even though they're a bit miserable, I think, and what do we use them for and what you better not use them for. Please try and complete all the steps from build a final exams table and write down any new concepts, write down any questions. And then we're going to look at the build a book catalog table over the next few days. So please, please, please start that. And I'm so sorry. I know Carmen's going to be doing this with you. I'm not trying to step on her toes. I'm just a book nerd, so I'm really excited about this as a lab. So this lab probably will take you more than if you could get that workshop and that lab done before tomorrow, I would be impressed, but I would probably fuss at you for trying to do too much. I'd say have a think about this and sort it out over the next few days. You obviously don't have to. I'm extremely not the boss of you. But if any of you did want to share these, I am so interested in what y'all are reading. So, as a nosy person, you don't have to, you never have to share your work. But if you're excited to show it off, here is, again, one more time, here is Phil's recipe for how to use GitHub Pages to show yours off. Okay. I'm going to, come back here to, after the session, please work through these. And Sunny, I love this. So Sunny's saying this is a random question. I love a random question. So Sunny's coming way back when we were talking about types, the types attribute, the different types of types we could assign to our input elements. And Sunny's saying like, hey, if you were making something like a star rating system, would you want to put a range or a radio input? And Sunny's saying that they've heard that radio buttons are hard to style, and you don't know exactly how hard, right? Right. So radio buttons do tend to be a bit more fixed. And nope. I'm going to answer your core question. And with your, hey, what about styling and radio buttons? What I'm going to do is say, when we start picking up some CSS, or even before that, if you want to like preview a little, going ahead and experimenting with it. Say, hey, what kinds of things can I do with a radio button? Can I get weird with it? So if I was making something like a star rating system, this is a little unfair, but there is a little bit of, there's space for creativity here. So having a range, if I was working on my build a book catalog table and I wanted to add an input for rating the book 1 to 4 stars, for me personally, I might have like a range just because I feel like the slider on the range might feel more satisfying for that specific type of use case. But if I'm saying I'm using a please rate my website, maybe I want to give people radio buttons because maybe radio buttons will nudge them to be a little bit more generous. So here, unfortunately, we are having our very favorite answer. It depends. Michelle's asking, hey, can we share the link to our GitHub pages for showcasing, or would that be considered self-promotion? I think you should be able to share that, but what I'm going to go ahead and do is have a chat with the Free Code Camp folks and just say, hey, can we go easy on folks on this channel sharing their work because we've specifically asked them to. So go ahead and share. If you get in trouble, you just tell them that Jess said to share it. And so here, use your good judgment. If your link to your GitHub page is showcasing your please buy my handmade pasta, that is probably going to be a little bit of self-promotion. But if you're like, hey, Jess told me to do a good job with this book catalog table and I want to show her, I I would be surprised if that was self-promotion. If you do get in trouble, A, I'll have a chat with the team in hand, and B, please come get me. Sorry. All right, my loves, this has been a glorious time. I've loved talking about this with all of you, but I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Please have the easiest rest of your day and start having a ponder about tables. Carmen will see you tomorrow, and I will see you next Monday. Bye, team.